Welcome to this video on the InterAcct system job types. There are a number of different ways that you can set up a job in the system, and the job types allows you to be able to differentiate between a service job, manufacturing job, project, or a small do and charge job. From the main menu we go into the jobs menu, and from here into job types. Underneath here we've set up a bunch of standard job types. When we're looking at the screen, there's quite a few different options that we can turn on and off as far as whether we're going to have a phase, budgets, quotes, estimates. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a job, and I'm going to turn these features on and off just so that you can get an idea of what might be available. So here we are at a job header with pretty much everything turned off that we can turn off on the system. If we want to turn features on, probably the most common thing that would happen on a job is that we're going to have a customer. So I'm going to turn on the customer flag, and now you can see that it's popped in a box here which is, do we have a client? I can then find a client on the list here and store their details. Now in most cases, if we're going to have a client, we're probably going to have a client site as well, just so that we know where we're going to do the job, or where the equipment that we're servicing is going to be normally located. So if we turn on site location, you can see in here that we can then pick where the job's going to be located. Now, with our jobs as well, we've got the ability to be able to have multiple phases. So at the moment you can see here that we don't even have a link to the screen that we would normally see, which is the budget. So I'm going to turn on the budget screen, and now we've got a link here through to budgets and variances. This is a screen that allows us to see a summary of where the job's up to, showing here in this case just only one sub-job or phase, and we can then see the materials, subbies, sundries and costs that are underneath there. But if we wanted to be able to have the job have multiple phases, and we've bought the multiple phases module, that menu link then changes to this budget actual variances, and then we get a list of different phases that are in this job, and then underneath each of those phases the same type of summary that we've got underneath the budget without phases. But obviously we can have multiple phases in a job to be able to break down to see analysis of contract values of those phases and expected costs in those areas, as well as actual costs and variance as well. One of the other options that we've got is to be able to use the system to create estimates. So we can have the detailed estimating system turned on, or the summary estimate system turned on. There are videos that look at what the estimating summary system is, as well as the detailed estimating system. I won't try to go through those at the moment, but you can see that those menu links that were on the job type setup screen, all they're doing is turning on those different menu links underneath here. We've also got a question about whether this job has got the bottom fields turned on, and we can turn these on here. So what that does is it turns on some extra fields that are pulling data from the financial summary screen of the job. Now some people find this screen a little bit too busy, there's too much information on it, so they don't want to necessarily see that. So with the employee work schedules turned on, when we have the open job schedule screen, normally that field is set to no, because that's what we've got it set up under the job. I'm just going to turn it to yes, so that then opens up this employee work tasks where we can put in a schedule of which employees are working on that job, when they're likely to start and finish, both in terms of days as well as time. That will then copy that data through to the appointment schedule or daily or diary alert system. One of the other questions that's a little bit harder to understand is the allocate all question. So allocate all underneath the job type setup doesn't have any effect on the job header, unlike most of the other fields that are there. The allocate all function is designed to be able to say, when we've got materials required for a job, would we like those materials when they arrive into the warehouse to be allocated automatically to the job and taken out of stock in one step? Or would we like to put them into stock and at a later stage choose to do a stock issue to remove them from stock and put them to the job? While they're in stock, they will be allocated as reserve to the job, so they're not available for other jobs. But then if we were to do a stock take on our materials, we would need to include those materials in there as they haven't been issued at this stage. I guess it just depends on how much inventory control you've got in your business. There's also an option to be able to copy across standard phases. So if you're regularly creating the same types of sub-jobs or phases underneath your job, rather than coming into this phase screen here and adding in the phases one by one to your job, you can have those pre-populate into the job as soon as you create the job, saving you some time. We've also got a question in here on whether or not you have the manufacturing module. Now the manufacturing module, I could turn off a bunch of these other fields here. So our job header is looking a little bit simpler than the job was before, and now what I'm going to do is turn on the manufacturing module. So when we turn on the manufacturing system, we've now got a question in here about what item we wish to manufacture, and I've got a machine in here, and then I can come through here and put in production quantities and manufacturing process relating to that. So you can see that even though the manufacturing system doesn't have a client listed here, we can have clients listed underneath our production quantities of how many we're going to make and who they're going to be for. We're still using the same framework in the software and the same screens to be able to set up a job, whether we're creating a project style job to build a house or a manufacturing job to manufacture products. Underneath here we'll still have the same options of being able to put in timesheets, stock issues, subcontractor claims and everything else that we can do underneath the job, but obviously the menu changes quite a lot when we're wanting to be looking at a manufacturing job over a project style job. We also have the option to be able to have that this job relates, instead of manufacturing, to servicing equipment, and then underneath here we've now got a list of equipment that we're going to be servicing for that client, and it can pull through all the details of that particular type of equipment that we have. So this is a slightly different job. This is another service job, but in this case here we're actually servicing one of our own internal capital machines. So I can then pick that we're going to be servicing the table saw and then create a service job, putting labour, materials and subbies against that job, and then having that update the machine costing screen and service history of that machine underneath our machines and capital equipment database. There's an option in the setup as well when we've got a project style job, and I'll just make this a project job all of a sudden. Now one of the other fields that we've got in the setup is something called Billable Stages. So when we're setting up a job, if we've got multiple phases within the job, and obviously we're going to need to turn on our budgets again. So when we set up our multiple phases underneath here, one of the options underneath the phases is to be able to put in a contract amount for that phase, to say this part of the job is going to be sold to the client for this agreed amount. The job phases are where we're going to use to analyse the costs on the job, but it can be for the setup of the contract. But in a situation where the contract is different from how we're wanting to analyse the costs on the job, we can turn on the Billable Stages module. So by having Billable Stages turned on, when we go through the open job process, it will then ask us to set up the stages of the job and the contract sums for those stages, and then allow us, when we create progress claims or invoices against that job, to be able to break down the percentages of the stages completed rather than of the contract phase values. There's a question underneath the setup of the jobs as well called professional. Now this isn't a slight on people that as to whether or not they're professional service or not. This is related to whether you're in a type of industry that doesn't have any materials or subcontractors, that you're only really providing professional services. So it simplifies a number of the job screens to show you less options as far as job costing. Another one of the questions relates to whether or not we have progress claims on our jobs. Now we can create a number of different invoices underneath a job, and a different area to the software which is the progress claims area. This allows us to create a claim to a client that can later on be reversed and turned into an invoice. The claim itself won't have a GST effect on the software, but would have a revenue effect that gets reversed out when the invoice is raised. Another option of being able to create a job is to be able to have repair work tasks. The repair works task system is a simplified billing and estimating system that allows you to create a number of different work elements that you're going to be working on, and to be able to create a quotation for those work elements, and to be able to invoice those out as well when they are completed. There is a video that looks at the repair work task system if you're wanting to know more about that, how that works. There's another question on invoice format as well, asking whether or not we're going to have draft invoicing or not. The draft invoice system is designed to be allowed to flag jobs that are going to be run through an automatic invoicing system, to be able to say that we're going to create a due and charge invoice based on costs to date with their markups, and bill the client based on the work that's been performed so far. Obviously, if you're doing small due and charge jobs, That would be useful, but if you're also doing larger project jobs, you want to be able to have a way to differentiate which jobs are going to be created through the automatic draft invoicing routine. That invoice format, yes or no, is do you want to have draft invoices, yes or no. So for most people, it would be answered no. The other fields that are on the job type setup screen, and if we just jump back and have a look at that screen now, such as priority, is just pulling through a default priority for the job. Employee, is there a default employee that looks after this type of job? And estimate value, do we want to put in a default estimate dollar value to the job at the time that we create it before we have a chance to be able to create a more detailed estimate underneath the detailed estimating or summary estimate systems. There is also a default general ledger account in here, and that's where the revenue from this type of job would go in your profit and loss. If you have any other questions about how the job type system works, please contact support@interact.com.au. Thank you.